Developing a specific training program. On occasion, the fire officer may need to develop a specific training program that is not covered by an existing certification training program or prepared lesson plan. This may be a work improvement plan or training related to a new device or procedure. NFPA Fire Instructor 2 covers the development of a training program in more detail. Here is an overview of the 5 steps for developing a training program. Assess needs. The fire officer must first confirm that there is a need for a training program. Some performance problems may be better solved through an engineering solution. For example, the effective use of personal alert safety system (PASS) devices was a problem with the first generation of devices. Many firefighters were operating in an IDLH environment while their PASS device was not armed. Despite training programs and, in some departments, progressive discipline, the devices remain unarmed. An engineering solution has resolved this performance issue. The PASS device is now integrated into the SCBA and is armed every time the high-pressure hose is charged. Establish objectives. Training has occurred when there is an observable change in behavior. Prior to undertaking the training program, you should identify the specific behavior you want the firefighters to exhibit after the training. The desired behavior could be that firefighters will demonstrate the proper procedures for deploying a ground ladder. The description must include the conditions under which the behavior will be demonstrated. For example, if an expectation is that a ground ladder will be deployed while firefighters are wearing full protective clothing and SCBA, then that condition must be part of the expected firefighter behavior. The final part of the objective is the measure of performance. Firefighter evolutions are often timed events, so the measure of performance is usually described in terms of the time required to complete a task properly. The completed behavioral objective could look like this. Given a fire department pumper and a building 2 or more stories high, a crew of 2 firefighters will exit the pumper in full personal protective clothing and SCBA. Select and remove the appropriate ground ladder from the pumper and properly deploy the ground ladder to the assigned window within 2 minutes. Develop the training program. Various methods exist for developing the training program. If training is needed for a new device, the manufacturer or vendor may have a training package available. If training is needed for a new procedure or company evolution, the department may have a template the fire officer can use. Other departments may have developed training programs, props, or resources that they will share. Organizations such as IAFC's Near Miss Responder Safety Learning Network and special interest websites may post resources available for downloading. A few minutes of research may provide a rich response. The fire officer also needs to consider how the training will be delivered. Will it require a skill drill using multiple companies, or can this skill be practiced by an individual firefighter? Deliver the training. New programs should be subjected to a pilot class or trial run before finalization. This sort of testing provides the opportunity to tweak the program, identify any problems, and correct any unforeseen issues. Although the use of a lesson plan is part of the 4-step method, it is important that the fire officer develop lesson plans for every training program. A good lesson plan satisfies 4 criteria. 1. Organizes the lesson. 2. Identifies key points. 3. Can be reused. And 4. Allows others to teach the program. Evaluate the impact. Have you accomplished the change of behavior? Was the training program worth the firefighters' or instructors' time? Was the instructional method appropriate for the learning objective? What can the instructor developer do to improve the training program? Many successful National Fire Service training programs, such as the Reading Smoke, Size Up technique, and the Rapid Intervention program, have been developed by fire officers and firefighters. They have the perspective, the understanding, and the need to develop and share vital emergency activity training. Addressing member-related problems. A problem may be defined as the difference between the current situation and the desired situation. If the way the apparatus driver parks at a highway incident places the fire crew at a greater risk than is necessary, it is a problem. Forcing a commercial door and destroying a display window when rapid entry key safe is available is a problem. In each of these cases, there is a discrepancy between the current and the desired situations. Fires and emergency incidents represent a unique category of problems that call for specialized problem-solving skills. Non-emergency situations require the application of conventional problem-solving skills and techniques. These situations include supervisory, management, and administrative activities in which the fire officer is directly responsible for resolving the problem, as well as initially processing situations that require resolution from an administrative or executive fire officer. These circumstances include situations that involve individual or organizations outside of the fire department. Decision-making skills are used whenever the fire officer faces a problem or situation that requires a response. Promotional examinations evaluate the ability of fire officer candidates to exercise good judgment and make sound decisions. Decisions should always be guided by organizational values, guidelines, policies, and procedures. This is true even when the decision made does not agree with the fire officer's opinion or personal preferences. Requiring the fire officer to act in the best interest of the department in solving problems and making decisions does not mean that other values and considerations are ignored, however. Several solutions to a problem may exist, some better than others and some more desirable to one set of interests than another. In most cases, there is a reasonable solution that serves multiple interests and concerns. In other cases, however, one concern must prevail over all others. Problem-solving techniques are designed to identify and evaluate the realistic potential solutions to a problem and determine the best decision. Complaints, conflicts, and mistakes. Complaints, conflicts, and mistakes are special categories of problems. One of the key factors in decision-making is how to deal with situations that involve conflicts or complaints. These three terms are defined as follows. A complaint is an expression of grief, regret, pain, censure, or resentment, a lamentation, an accusation, or fault-finding. A conflict is a state of opposition between two parties. A complaint is often a manifestation of a conflict. A mistake is an error or fault resulting from bad judgment, deficient knowledge, or carelessness. It can also be a misconception or misunderstanding. Mistakes happen. The issue is how to deal with a mistake, or the perception of a mistake, when someone complains to the fire officer about it. Sometimes a fire officer has to make a decision or enforce a policy that is not popular with the crew members. A citizen could be frustrated with a fire department action or may be unhappy with a situation. People misbehave and make mistakes. Disagreements and differences of opinion occur. It is not possible to make everyone happy all the time, but a fire officer must deal with all of these situations in a professional manner. Dealing appropriately with problems and conflicts requires maturity, patience, determination, and courage. Figure 3-14, page 100. The types of problems that a fire officer could be expected to encounter can be classified into four broad categories. 1. In-house issues. Situations or decisions occurring at the work location that are within the direct scope of supervisory responsibilities. An example might be a complaint about the assignment of duties to different individuals with a fire station. Most of these conflicts begin and end at the company officer level. 2. Internal departmental issues. Operational policies, decisions, or activities that go beyond the scope of the local fire station. An example is a conflict over where a reserve ladder truck will be housed and which company will be responsible for maintaining it. Another example is a dispute between companies over the tasks of rapid intervention team in a high-rise fire. The resolution usually requires action by command officers at a higher level on the organizational chart. 3. External issues. Fire department activities that involve private citizens or another organization. An example is a citizen making a complaint about an inappropriate remark uttered during an emergency medical services (EMS) incident. External issues require the fire officer to perform one additional task early in the conflict resolution process, making sure that the fire officer's supervisor is not surprised. It is poor form for the battalion chief to learn about a fire department incident from the local media. 4. High-profile incidents. Any issues that are likely to become major events. An example might be a firefighter who is arrested while on duty. The department must take immediate actions to respond to these events. Senior fire administrators often become directly involved in these situations or keep a close watch on how they are handled. As discussed earlier, a problem should be solved at the lowest possible level within an organization. A fire officer is expected to manage problems within the level of authority for a supervising or managing fire officer. At the same time, the fire officer should recognize those problems that need to be handled at a higher level and make the appropriate notifications without delay. If there is any doubt, it is wise to discuss the situation with the officer at the next higher level in the chain of command. Managing conflict. One factor that distinguishes a fire officer from a firefighter is the responsibility to act as an agent of the formal organization. A fire officer is the official first-level representative of the fire department administration when dealing with subordinates and enforcing policies and procedures. This responsibility places the fire officer in a position to be the initial contact in dealing with a wide variety of problems, including situations that potentially involve conflict, emotions, or serious differences of opinion. Situations that involve conflicts and grievances require an additional set of skills that go beyond the general problem-solving model. The general model is designed to focus on solving the problem itself. In conflict situations, the issues are often much more complicated and sensitive. A relatively simple problem, for example, may become complicated by the ways that different individuals react to it or to one another. In some cases, the problem centers on the relationship between individuals or groups and plays out in relation to other issues. Personal conflicts and grievances. The close living relationships within a fire company can produce a variety of tensions, anxieties, and interpersonal conflicts. This friction can occur in addition to the types of conflicts commonly experienced in most workplaces. One of the most difficult situations for a fire officer is an interpersonal conflict or grievance within the company or directly involving a company member. A fire officer may face 4 different types of internal conflict situations. A firefighter might come to an officer with a complaint about 1. A coworker or coworkers, 2. The work environment, including the fire station, apparatus, or equipment, 3. A fire department policy or procedure, 4. The fire officer's own behavior, decisions, or actions. The fire officer is the individual's first point of contact with the formal organization. The official response to the problem begins when the officer becomes aware that a problem exists. The relationship of the fire officer to the conflict and the complainant makes a significant difference in the role the officer can play in resolving the conflict. Fire officers with staff assignments must also be prepared to deal with problems that involve conflict. Their relationship to the individuals involved is likely to be different, but their responsibility to officially represent the formal organization is the same. Conflict resolution model. The conflict resolution model is a basic approach that can be used in situations where interpersonal conflict is the primary problem or a complicating factor. Listen and take detailed notes. The first phase of the conflict management template is to obtain as much information as possible about the problem. The fire officer should encourage the complainant to explain the situation completely. If the details are even slightly complicated, the fire officer should take notes. The person who is making a complaint has a certain perspective on the situation. Whether you agree or disagree with that person's perspective, an important starting point is to find out the complainant thinks about the situation. When dealing with an individual who is expressing a concern or a problem, the fire officer should focus on active listening. Engaged or active listening is the conscious process of securing all kinds of information through a combination of listening and observing. The listener gives the speaker his or her full attention, staying alert to any clues of unspoken meaning while also listening intently to every word that is spoken. The fire officer should be aware of nonverbal clues that make that may indicate agreement, dissatisfaction, anger, or other emotions. Often, these nonverbal clues provide great insight into the disposition of the speaker. The fire officer actively seeks to keep the conversation open and satisfying to the speaker, showing an interest in feelings and emotions as well as raw information. Figure 3-15, page 101. Paraphrase and receive feedback. The first objective should be to understand the issue and why the individual is complaining. After listening, the fire officer should be able to paraphrase the complaint and recite it back to the complainant. Paraphrasing the issue and receiving feedback from the complainant accomplishes two goals. The fire officer finishes this phase with a good understanding of the issue from the complainant's perspective, and the complainant feels that the fire officer really listened. Do not explain or excuse. In situations where the complainant is directly related to actions taken or policies enforced by the fire officer, it is understandable that the fire officer would want to respond immediately to the complaint. In this situation, it is important to listen and to process the information before deciding on an appropriate response. A reflexive explanation or excuse gives the individual an additional reason to complain. If the complainant feels strongly enough to complain about something the officer has done, that officer's explanation probably will not solve the problem. Investigate. An investigation is a detailed inquiry or systematic examination. All complaints should be investigated, even if the foundation for the complaint appears to be weak or non-existent. Fire department procedures should determine who will conduct the investigation depending on the nature of the complaint and the relationship of the individuals who are involved. Sometimes the fire officer who received the complaint is assigned to conduct the investigation. However, a fire officer who is directly or personally involved in the problem should never be involved in conducting the investigation. Sensitive matters require an appropriate level of investigator. The purpose of the investigation is to obtain additional information beyond the original complaint. The investigator must be impartial in gathering and documenting information. The information could come from other individuals, reference documents, or incident-specific data. When investigating a human resources conflict, such as a payroll or work assignment issue, the fire officer might have to refer to specific departmental directives and regulations. The product of an investigation is a report which is provided in an appropriate format for the fire officer's immediate supervisor. Figure 3-16, page 103. A complete investigative report has three objectives. 1. The report must first identify and clearly explain the issues. 2. The report should then provide a complete, impartial, and factual presentation of the background information and relevant facts. 3. The conclusion should be a recommended action plan, which is based on and supported by the information. Take action. Once the investigation is completed, the fire officer presents the findings and recommended action to a supervisor at a higher level. There are 4 possible responses. 1. Take no further action. The investigation may conclude that the complaint was unfounded or requires no further action. If the complaint was related to an earlier decision or action, that original decision is affirmed. The response should include the reasons why no further action is recommended. 2. Recommend the action requested by the complainant. The investigation may conclude that the complaint was justified and that the requested action is the best solution to the problem. 3. Suggest an alternative solution. The investigation may conclude that some alternative action or policy is the best solution to address the complainant's concerns. For example, a citizen might complain that the fire truck blocks several spaces in the parking lot at the local gym and does not want the firefighters to go there. The fire officer meets with the citizen and proposes a more appropriate parking space for the fire truck. The compromise is acceptable to the citizen and to the department. 4. Refer the issue to the office or person who can provide a remedy. Other members of the fire department or some other municipal agency may be able to provide the relief the complainant seeks. Grievance procedures require that the employee start with the immediate supervisor for all complaints. If the employee is not satisfied with the response at that level, then he or she can take the grievance to a higher level. If the problem involves a paycheck deduction issue, it will probably have to be resolved by the payroll clerk or human resources officer. The fire officer's duty is to refer the complaint to the appropriate person. Follow up. For many of the conflicts, the fire officer needs to follow up on the complainant to see whether the problem is resolved. Understanding emotional confrontations. Emotional confrontation between the fire officer and a firefighter may be an example of clashing psychological contracts. Psychological contract refers to mutual unwritten expectations that exist between an employee and his or her employer regarding policies and practices in their organization. The psychological contract influences the attitude and job performance of the employee. Each of us has a system of beliefs that define our unwritten expectations with the fire department. Our beliefs are shaped by our values, on-the-job experiences, and broader societal norms with which we agree. When a discussion or situation occurs that is in conflict with our unwritten expectations, we often respond emotionally. When we get emotional, scared, angry, or euphoric, adrenaline fills up the prefrontal lobes of the neocortex of the brain, creating an emotional bubble that interferes with the ability to hear or consider any response to the issues that make up this confrontation. Michael Tegman, an emergency service performance consultant, provides a conflict resolution model that is especially effective when emotions are high. This model was effective for Tegman when working with employees during the stressful creation of the paramedic ambulance service under a tight schedule. He continued to refine the model while working as a consultant. The model follows 4 steps. 1. Drain the emotional bubble. 2. Understand the complainant's viewpoint. 3. Help the complainant feel understood. 4. Identify the complainant's expectation for resolution. Step 1. Drain the emotional bubble. The body reacts to emotional conflict or stress the same way it does when you are a member of the first arriving company at a working structure fire. Both situations result in dumping of adrenaline to prepare the body to fight or run away. The same adrenaline-inducing red haze that reduces firefighter effectiveness at emergencies also happens to ordinary citizens. It tends to bring complaints to the surface and impedes resolution of conflicts. Adrenaline fills up the prefrontal lobes of the neocortex of the brain, creating an emotional bubble that interferes with the ability of the complainant to hear the fire officer or consider any response to the issue. Tegman recommends listening deeply, actively, and empathetically to drain this emotional bubble. This is not an easy task for the fire officer, but writing detailed notes and not explaining or excusing can facilitate this process. The fire officer asks questions and encourages responses, draining the emotional bubble by allowing the complainant to express grief, regret, pain, censure, or resentment completely. This discussion should be held in private and should adhere to a few ground rules. Most importantly, there should be no physical contact. If the discussion is between a firefighter and a fire officer, avoid personal attacks and concentrate on the work issues. Step 2. Understand the complainant's viewpoint. The initial complaint or behavior may be a sign or symptom of a larger problem. By draining the emotional bubble through active listening, the fire officer may identify the root cause or issue of the complaint. Internal conflicts, grievances, or issues occasionally suffered from long memories. It may require some investigating to understand the current issue, which may be related to something that happened months ago or may be wrapped up in a history and tradition. Step 3. Help the complainant feel understood. The listen and take detailed notes part of the basic conflict management template includes the recommendation to paraphrase and repeat back what you heard from the complaint. Some issues may be more readily resolved if the complainant feels that the fire officer understands the issue's conflict or problem. Step 4. Identify the complainant's expectation for resolution. By this final step, the complainant has drained the emotional bubble, has been able to describe what is going on and feels that the fire officer understands the issue, problem, conflict, or grievance. The fire officer should now ask what the complainant expects the department to do to resolve this issue. If the problem is an internal grievance, this is where the employee should be asked to describe the desired action. Behavioral and physical health issues. A rising leadership challenge is firefighter behavioral and physical health. Since 2017, the rate of firefighter suicide has exceeded the rate of line of duty deaths. A 2015 study by Firefighter Behavioral Health Alliance, FFBHA, reports that 37% of those surveyed contemplated suicide and almost 7% had attempted it. That is more than 10 times the rate of the general population. Awareness. The fire service has several factors that promote resiliency, such as a sense of belonging and support from one another, an enduring sense of purpose, and often a strong sense of gratitude and respect from the public. Fire officers should consider the following warning signs of stress-related issues in an individual. 1. Isolation from others. 2. Disturbed sleep. 3. Increased irritability. 4. Decreased interest in significant activities. 5. Self-destructive or reckless behavior. Substance abuse. Firefighters are heavier users of alcohol than the general population. One study found 58% of the firefighters reporting binge drinking, in comparison to the 23% of males in the general population who reported binge drinking. Less data exists regarding the firefighter drug abuse. The following are signs that a firefighter may be grappling with substance abuse. Mood swings and desire to spend time alone. Loss of interest or lack of socialization. Increased anxiety and crankiness. Missing work or continuous issues at work. Change in diet. Lack of care and physical appearance. Family and marital problems. 3 things make firefighting different from other professions: exposure to danger, exposure to trauma, and the 24-hour shift. Gagliano states that a successful firefighter marriage requires 5 essential conversations. 1. Re-entry time. Allowing the returning spouse some time to enter the home without hassle or massive conversation. Sleep deprivation, adrenaline backlash, and the impact of trauma require transition time from fireground warrior to loving spouse and parent. 2. Harshness and gallows humor. Anger or dark humor from trauma combined with aggression from adrenaline results in a defense mechanism by the firefighter that does not travel well outside the fire station. Develop key phrases ahead of time so the spouse can lovingly point out when the firefighter is acting inappropriately at home. 3. Handling the tough runs. Generally, the stressful things a firefighter encounters at work remain at work. If it has been a particularly bad incident or workday, the firefighter should tell their spouse their real feelings and fears after a tough run or shift. 4. Dealing with the fix-it mentality. Firefighters are fixers on steroids. When the spouse is venting about an issue, it is difficult for the firefighter to empathetically listen and not respond to it as a situation requiring immediate fixing. 5. Keep your first family first. Set boundaries so that the second family, the fire service, does not push away the first family. One of the deadliest enemies of marriage is the pursuit of wealth at the cost of family time. Annual reports that identify the highest paid municipal workers often include firefighters and fire officers who will occasionally earn more in overtime than what they received for their regular salary. A West Coast firefighter made $300,000 in overtime pay on top of his $92,000 annual pay, telling a reporter that he, quote, basically lived at the station and did not go home often. Financial problems. ABC's 2020 television program produced a series of episodes called My Reality, Hidden America, that looked at working Americans and the realities they face in making ends meet. The interviewees included a firefighter-paramedic named Chris Smith, who works in 3 different towns and spends up to 104 hours a week at work to make ends meet. He slept in his home for a total of 3 nights in February 2017. A 30% jump in his health insurance premium and a flooded backyard wiped out the family budget. There are 3 reasons for this struggle to maintain adequate income. Greater personal debt. Student tuition loans are the fastest growing segment of household debt, increasing by almost 157% since 2007. Auto loan debt has increased by over 50% since 2007, with the average auto loan stretched to 6 years. Stagnant purchasing power. While paychecks are bigger, purchasing power has hardly budged. After adjusting for inflation, however, today's average hourly wage has just about the same purchasing power it did in 1978, following a long slide in the 1980s and early 1990s, and bumpy, inconsistent growth since then. In fact, in real terms, average hourly earnings peaked more than 45 years ago. The $4.03 an hour rate recorded in January 1973 had the same purchasing power that $23.68 would today. Slow recovery from recent recessions. Local governments have not returned to the financial health they had in the late 1990s. The recession of 2001 and the Great Recession of 2007 to 2009 were different than earlier recessions. The decline in local and state tax revenue was steep in both periods, and the recovery has been slower than any earlier recession. The Urban Institute pointed out, even though 42 states had recovered their nominal 2008 tax revenue levels by 2013, only 24 experienced real revenue growth. Jason Hauscher provides a vivid example of this situation. In 2009, I made more than $100,000. Mind you, that included an average of about 40 hours of overtime a month. Sounds great, right? The problem, I couldn't afford to pay a $300 electric bill. I had a wife, a daughter, and another kid on the way. Resiliency to stress. The American Psychological Association describes resiliency as the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or significant sources of stress, such as family relationship problems, serious health problems, or workplace and financial stressors. It means bouncing back from difficult experiences. The nature of firefighting and emergency medical responses can create fear or horror in the responder. Fear is encountering a situation that is perceived as a threat to you, such as encountering gunfire as the fire company is arriving at an incident location. Horror is a reaction to a situation experienced by the responder, such as finding an infant burned to death in a structure fire. In addition to these specific sentinel events, firefighters experience an adrenaline dump and a fight or flight response every time they respond to a 911 call. Firefighters encounter the acute stress of a sentinel event as well as the accumulated stress of everyday 911 responses. Both situations create physical and emotional reactions that will be different for each firefighter. Moral injury. Moral injury was first used to describe soldiers' response to their actions in war. It represents perpetrating, failing to prevent, bearing witness to, or learning about acts that transgress deeply held moral beliefs and expectations. Physicians adopted the concept when describing the frustration of being unable to provide high-quality care and healing in the context of health care. Like public safety workers and soldiers, physicians are experiencing a high level of suicide. Moral injury occurs for firefighters when there is a gap between what they want to do and the conditions that they are confronting. The opioid epidemic, where fire company first responders are finding themselves resuscitating the same person a couple of times a year with no indication of improvement, is one example. In some communities, the number of firefighters on duty has shrunk while the workload has increased. Disasters and local incidents occur in which firefighters are faced with devastating human conditions that they cannot reverse or mitigate, creating a situation described by Litz as a deep soul wound that pierces a person's identity, sense of morality, and relationship to society. Acute stress disorder. In acute stress disorder, ASD, a person who experienced, witnessed, or was confronted with a traumatic event may experience numbing, reduced awareness, depersonalization, derealization, or amnesia. The person feels disconnected and has significant impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning. To get an ASD diagnosis, the disorder must last for a minimum of 3 days and a maximum of 4 weeks. Onset must occur within 4 weeks of the event. ASD may be the precursor to PTSD. Post-traumatic stress disorder. Post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, is characterized by symptoms of avoidance and nervous system arousal after experiencing or witnessing a traumatic event. Specific criteria to identify PTSD are as follows. 1. Traumatic event. A person who experienced, witnessed, or was confronted with a traumatic event. 2. Intrusion or re-experiencing. Describing ways that someone re-experiences the event. This could look like A. Intrusive thoughts or memories. B. Nightmares related to the traumatic event. C. Flashbacks, feeling like an event is happening again. D. Psychological and physical reactivity to reminders of the traumatic event, such as an anniversary. 3. Avoidance symptoms. Ways that someone may try to avoid any memory of the event and must include one of the following. A. Avoiding thoughts or feelings connected to the traumatic event. B. Avoiding people or situations connected to the traumatic event. 4. Negative alterations in mood or cognitions. This newer criterion captures many symptoms that have long been observed. There is a decline in someone's mood or thought patterns, which can include A. Memory problems that are exclusive to the event. B. Negative thoughts or beliefs about one's self or the world. C. Distorted sense of blame for oneself or others related to the event. D. Being stuck in severe emotions related to the trauma. Example, horror, shame, sadness. E. Severely reduced interest in pre-trauma activities. F. Feeling detached, isolated, or disconnected from other people. 5. Increased arousal symptoms. Person remains hypervigilant to threats. A. Difficulty concentrating. B. Irritability. C. Increased temper or anger. D. Difficulty falling or staying asleep. E. Hypervigilance. F. Being easily startled. Behavioral health resources for fire officers. Fire service organizations have been mobilizing to provide resources and tools to reduce the impacts of behavioral health issues for firefighters. This remains an evolving issue, but as of this publication, resources are available from the following sources. National Fallen Firefighters Foundation, Firefighter Behavioral Health Alliance, International Association of Fire Chiefs Safety, Health, and Survival Section, International Association of Firefighters Behavioral Health Programs. Employee Assistance Programs. An Employee Assistance Program, EAP, is designed to deal with issues such as substance abuse, emotional or mental health issues, marital and family difficulties, or other difficulties that affect job performance. EAPs help the employee cope with underlying issues that might be affecting workplace performance. Fire department EAPs are comprehensive programs that deal with a wide variety of issues that can affect firefighters. When an EAP is available, it is a resource that firefighters can turn to when in crisis. One important characteristic of an EAP is its ability to maintain the value to the organization of highly trained emergency service professionals. Consider a firefighter with chronic tardiness. If the firefighter is unable to correct this behavioral problem and the progressive discipline process is followed, then termination is inevitable. The underlying problem, however, could be an off-the-job issue that the individual cannot solve without assistance. Termination of an otherwise good employee would be a tremendous waste in resources because it could cost the department as much as $100,000 to find and train a replacement. If EAP involvement can help solve the problem, it is worth the effort. Consider some of the reasons a firefighter might continue to report late for work. Child or elder care issues. The employee is late due to unanticipated coverage problems. A family crisis. Examples can include a divorce proceeding or a dying family member. Alcoholism or substance abuse. Coming from a second job. This job may be needed to handle financial crisis, such as a child with a significant health problem not covered by insurance, a crushing debt, or gambling losses. a psychological condition, or chemical imbalance. Often these situations cause stress for the employee. A referral to the EAP may assist in addressing the issues. For an EAP to be successful, however, the fire officer must be able to recognize stress in an employee. Signs that may be noticed at work could include absenteeism, unexplained fatigue, memory problems, irritability, insomnia, increased use of products with caffeine or nicotine, withdrawal from the crew, resentment toward management or coworkers, stress-related illnesses, moodiness, or weight gain or loss. Although any of these points individually may not indicate the employee is stressed, multiple signs may indicate that the fire officer should ensure that the employee is aware of the EAP. If the stressful situation goes unresolved, it can seriously affect performance on the job. Obviously, an employee who is absent reduces the efficiency of a fire company. More subtle effects are produced by symptoms of stress, such as physical exhaustion from stress-related fatigue or lack of sleep. The fatigue or indecision caused by this condition can have serious safety consequences for every person on scene. It may also affect the group dynamics of the crew. A crew member who is stressed may not intend on taking it out on the crew at work, but the tension created is often evident to the rest of the company. The goal of the EAP is to provide counseling and rehabilitation services to get employees back to full productive duty as soon as possible. Fire department EAPs have been successful in lowering employee turnover and reducing absenteeism, tardiness, accidents, and injuries. In addition, fewer employee grievances and severe disciplinary actions are encountered when an EAP is in place. Successful EAPs place a high value on confidentiality and require that firefighters enter the program voluntarily. Although a fire officer can recommend or suggest that a firefighter consider seeking assistance from an EAP, the fire officer cannot know the details of any firefighter EAP interaction. The fire officer's focus is on the firefighter's job performance.